Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a first look at the Sony A7C. So my review unit just arrived, and I'm excited to share this with all of you because for many, the A7C was not an interesting launch. In fact, they were disappointed. They wanted something completely different, and I get it. Everybody has expectations of Sony's latest and greatest offering, and they don't always meet what you're looking for. But for me, this is really an exciting little camera because while many think it's just an A7 III crammed into one of Sony's APS-C style bodies, that to me is a really big deal because part of what, at least for me, was the beginning of my love for Sony's DI business was that they focused on giving you the smallest possible camera that really wouldn't compromise on overall performance. And as I've covered their cameras, we've moved farther and farther away from that. Now, for the first time, we're back in that sphere, in my opinion. Now, that doesn't mean that we can have smaller lenses, although Sony did, of course, introduce this tiny, and it is tiny, 28 to 60 millimeter kit lens. And I don't know how this is going to perform, but from, a form factor standpoint, it's a beautiful little pairing. I'm not expecting anything amazing. By the way, the pricing on this camera is $1,800 US. I will be testing this since it is full frame with a lot of the glass I have, as well as the G Master 24 to 70 mil. I just felt like even though that's a fairly big lens, it's also a very popular one. I'll also be testing it with some Sigma glass that I have here for review. For those of you that missed, I've got a 100 to 400 from Sigma, as well as their ultra wide angle, their 14 to 24. And yes, those lenses are going to be fairly large on this body, but don't forget, the beauty of this, again, is giving you as much possible performance as you could possibly get in as small a form factor as possible. So what do we have that's really nice besides the fact that it's small? We have Sony's new fully articulating flip-out display, which I do, initially I had my reservations, but that's because I had creature comforts associated with the old style, but there's no question this is a move in the right direction. We have the new placement of the video record button, which is, I think, great. At first when I was reviewing the A7S, I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but I do now, I can say I'm fully committed to its position. We have the benefit of working with, of course, the Z series battery, which I have right over here from my review unit kit package. Let's go ahead and pop that out. And really, for those of you that are saying, I don't need a camera like this, it doesn't do anything new, that's not really true. I mean, just giving us a new form factor, I do think is a big deal because you're talking about, it's not reinventing the wheel, but for many people, myself included, having something that's smaller, lighter, that, is not going to give you strain of any sort, that is a big deal. And I can already tell you the ergonomics on this are fairly good. I mean, better than I was expecting. Now you can see no touch screen here on the initial menu. So if you're expecting what is part of the A7S Mark III, you're not getting that. But you are getting a lot. Again, because this is capable, we're not getting the new menu system either. I don't want to get people excited. So, when you jump out and you say, wait, can I do that? No, you can't. But you have to remember, this is an $1,800 camera. So when I think about the A7 III, I would pick this over the A7 III instantly because, first of all, we have all of the nuanced improvements like the flip-out display and the form factor, as well as active steady shot, which means beyond the 5-axis internal stabilization that we've come to know and love, and all hope that Sony will eventually improve, we actually do have active steady shot on board here. We have real-time tracking, eye autofocus. These are all things that I think make this an incredibly well-rounded camera. Battery life should be solid. I'm not expecting overheating problems. This is, if I didn't own all of the full frame cameras that I have, this is probably where I would be starting. Now, granted, the 24 megapixel full frame sensor isn't a barn burner. We're limited to 4K 30, so you're not getting anything new. And that's why a lot of people keep saying it's basically just, an A7 III. And I get it, but, more people than you expect want to have that sort of capability in a body that's this small. Now, this isn't an A7 III, this is an A7R2. But just for reference, more megapixels here in the A7R4, but the A7R2. I have the A7R4 as well over there, but it's in a cage, so it's not going to make for a practical side-by-side comparison. But just think about this again. Let me fold the display back in. And of course, we have the slow and quick modes, which I'm going to be testing out as well. But just look at that and think about that even though the A7R line, of course, has the higher megapixel count, the A7R4, over 60 megapixels, the fact that Sony has put the performance of full frame into a body like this, I do look at as a major accomplishment. So it's not the camera for everybody, but I think this is a camera that's going to be a lot more popular than many people think. Now, if you already own something like an A7 III, then yeah, you're likely not going to pick it up. In fact, for me, the fact that I already own, right now, 2 full-frame Sony cameras that are incredibly competent, the A7R2 and A7R4, it's going to be a tough sell. But, it's something that if I didn't own them, I would absolutely jump on this thing. I do love the extra resolution that the R series affords me. But again, this has all of the niceties of Sony's latest and greatest tech. It just doesn't have a new sensor, high-res sensor like the R series. It doesn't have the new menu system on the A7S III. And really one of the biggest areas of contention, I think, is this EVF. So for me, that is one letdown with this camera. And I know that already, even without having tested it, because as much as I've always enjoyed shooting with Sony's APS-C cameras, being that I am left-eye dominant, this is a major pain for me. But again, this is all about form factor. So the EVF, it's just nice that it's there, because I realistically could have seen Sony produce something like this and not even have an EVF. I know for many of you that sounds bonkers, but think about it. I have waited for Sony to refresh the RX1 and give us internal 4K recording, as well as just, again, the RX1 capability in a tiny body. Well, this is as close as we're getting right now. And I could go grab the RX1. Hold on one second. Take a step around the studio. And that's why I'm excited about this camera. The RX1 has always been one of my favorites. To think that they could actually pull together something that is like the RX1, but with interchangeable lenses, is a bit of a pipe dream. So I, again, don't understand the hostility a lot of Sony users have towards this camera, because when I see it, I basically see the successor to the RX1 in a way. Now, don't get me wrong, the RX1, I still think, is in another league. It's just an amazing piece of hardware that I hope we see a refresh of. Sony, if you're listening, I think there's a market for it. Please do it. Even though it's got a fixed 35mm lens, the results that come out of this camera to this day are magical. No joke. So if they were to build out an RX1 Mark III, which I hope they do, but I'm not holding my breath, then that will be the camera to beat. In fact, that's the type of camera that could get me to abandon a lot of hardware, because this is still an amazing travel camera. But in this day and age, not as compelling for me to even consider carrying around or taking on a trip when the pandemic is over, which hopefully we don't have to wait more than another year. But the point I'm making here is that this is as close as we're getting right now to an RX1 Mark III, and it's more versatile because of the fact that you can stick any lens on there. So let's go ahead and get rid of the kit lens. And by the way, I can't tell you whether or not I'm going to end up recommending the kit lens, because the fact of the matter is it's kit glass. But I think because this camera comes in at $1,800 US, the kit lens might be a very popular option because of its form factor. Now, the G Master is going to make this somewhat lopsided, no question about it. But, remember, in spite of making it lopsided, if I'm able to actually get this G Master on, you're going to get some really nice results out of this pairing. From a build construction standpoint, the camera's well made. It does have weather sealing, but ergonomics not as good as the larger series A series cameras. So that's part of the rub, kind of like the EVF. But again, I think it has a lot going for it. And if you don't have very large hands, if you have medium to small size hands, I don't think you're going to have a problem with this camera. And when it comes to connectivity, that's another trade-off that you have to be aware of, but you do get somewhat of the same door design that we've got with the A7S. So we've got, as you can see, a headphone jack. We have a Type-C for charging and transfer if you decide to use it, as well as HDMI. And then if we take it to the next step, our SD card slot. And this is a departure. I mean, traditionally, the SD card slot, it's kind of plays with my brain a little bit. All Sony full-frame cameras, it's always on the right side of the body. And now here it is on the left. So, I mean, it's just new design, and it's the way they're fitting everything in. In all of their APS-C bodies like this, the SD card slot was always in the battery bay. So that's one new change. And then last but not least, of course, we have our mic jack. So, for everyone who's critiquing this camera and saying Sony didn't need to make a smaller full-frame camera, I completely disagree. I think this is, I'm not going to call it a sleeper. I think it was really smart that they did this. I was waiting for it. The A6600, which, of course, is an APS-C camera, made me feel like we were going in that direction, and then boom, we have the A7C, which I really think is a great middle ground for people that want full-frame performance but don't want full-frame bodies, even if they do have to, of course, adapt full-frame glass that will throw balance off. There are smaller full-frame lenses that will work beautifully with this. One example, well, there are many examples. I'm not even going to get off into that tangent. But other things you should know, it's capable of 10 frames per second, continuous shooting. And in addition to that, I mean, at a little over a pound, that full frame sensor with the real-time tracking, the eye autofocus, the active steady shot, the quick and slow modes being completely useful, I think. I mean, I'll see how they perform, right? But I pretty much know what to expect. And again, having the new flip-out screen, this may seem like a pittance to some of you, but again, if I wasn't already invested in other bodies, I would pick it up in a heartbeat because it's just a great starting point. And I think that's who this camera is really going to appeal to, is anyone who's been thinking about getting a Sony camera, or they were looking at other manufacturers, Canon, Nikon. You now have an option for full frame that just doesn't exist with anyone else. So while it's not going to break any milestones in terms of performance, it is doing that in terms of form factor. Again, this is as close to a refresh of the RX-1 as you could possibly get, and nowhere near the price. I mean, the original RX-1, much more expensive. Second gen, much more expensive. So just really excited to have this in-house, be able to review it and share it with all of you because, again, a lot of people don't think it's special. I do. And the fact that this is a starting point is something you also have to think about because down the road, I do anticipate, there's no reason that this new form factor can't become more feature-rich, more robust. It's starting just here with the A7C, but I see no reason that we can't get higher end models in this form factor. And that's when Sony's going to really, that's when I'm going to have to consider moving. For me, the 24 megapixels and the video features, they're not enough. I can tell you that now. Even if I fall in love with this camera, I'm not going to replace my A7R4 with it, or even my A7R2. However, if they start cramming in features eventually into this body that do rival what I'm accustomed to, or they do give us what a lot of people wished it had, that's when someone like me, who already has too many cameras, is probably going to jump on board with this. Not probably, I likely, absolutely will do it because it's going to give me a lighter build, and that's what I'm always looking for. Again, that's where my love for Sony DI began, was the small form factor, best in class video and, more importantly, of course, still quality. And now I feel like more than ever, Sony is returning to their roots. And a lot of people said, or felt it was the end of the APS-C era. And I have to say, with this camera, outside of giving them additional price points, I do kind of feel it's the end of the APS-C era for Sony, because now, in basically the same form factor, you can get so much more performance. I mean, it's not a whole nother planet than the A6600, but for many people out there, it will be. So again, I'm just really excited to test it, see how it works with all of the glass that I have in-house, both that I own and that I'm presently reviewing. So the timing is right. It's the holiday season, and God knows if I got this as a gift, I'd be a happy camper. And I haven't even shot with it yet. But again, if it's anything like what I expect it to be, then it's a marvel of technology. And that's what Sony is really good at doing. So it's a great thing. I mean, I never would have imagined we'd see a full frame camera with all the features that this has in this form factor. But Sony has delivered. Again, this is just a first look. I'm excited because there's a lot to be excited about. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.